Hello, konnichiwa. I am really humbled that this day, the starting day of PRI in person, has focused so much on policy. We have a big team at the PRI who has been working for the past 10 years on different topics from investor duties to corporate disclosures to taxonomies to stewardship to support our signatories, connect with policymakers, with regulators to enact good policy reforms that help investors navigate this increasingly complex and changing world. So this session is what separates you from our amazing party later on, but I hope you'll find it instructive and you will be able to get some key takeaways with you from this entire day. We started this morning with the policy conference. We had really good discussions, and now we heard a lot on the economic transition and the need for collaborative engagement. So we are going to talk essentially about two topics. One is what policy reforms are needed to enable this economic transition that is so much needed, but also how to address the increasing regulatory fragmentation that we see in different markets. So for this, I have the perfect panel, which I would welcome on stage. A government representative, Jessica Robinson, Minister-Counsellor and Senior Treasury Representative at the Australian Embassy in Tokyo, a financial regulator, Hideki Takada, Director of Strategy Development at the Japan FSA, and a standard setter, Hiroshi Komori, board member of the International Sustainable Standards Board. And we also have online an international organization, Tajinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of IOSCO, who unfortunately, because of a missed flight connection, couldn't join us, but we're very lucky to have him online to nevertheless join this important discussion. So, let us start. I hope that Mr. Singh is online. Hello, welcome.
Hello, hello.
So let me start with you. You have heard about the need for the economic transition. I just wanted to check the temperature in the room. And I'm not going to ask you to stand up. Just raise your hand. We do old school, no Slido. So are policy reforms necessary to support investors on the path towards the economic transition, as discussed in the opening plenary? If you agree, please raise your hand. And it would be good to see a lot of hands. That's amazing. Thank you so much. So, policy matters. I would like to start with you, Tajinder. You spoke at PRI's inaugural policy conference in 2019 at PRI in person in Paris. And back then, IOSCO had just published their first ESG statement, and we're really excited about it. But since then, the sustainable finance policy context has changed significantly. So, as your previous chair of IOSCO had formulated it, I love this expression, hardwiring sustainability into financial regulations is the job of securities regulators now in this current changing world. So, and now you have just asked regulators around the world to adopt ISSB. Sustainable finance policy reform with the IOSCO task force has really become an integral part of your mandate. So can you please briefly reflect on IOSCO's journey for these past few years?
Absolutely. Thank you, Margarita, and thank you for having me there, even if virtually, and apologies for not being there in person. In fact, I had boarded my flight for Tokyo, but I couldn't go because it was disrupted. I very much remember, Margarita, the 2019 PRI inaugural conference that you were talking about. And as I was thinking about that, I was also thinking how much the world has changed since then, especially on sustainable finance, and hopefully most of it positively in terms of regulatory developments. Because we remember, at that time we used to talk about the alphabet soup of standards. I think, it's probably not referred to so much now. And of course, there was the concern about greenwashing being conducted by asset managers, even if it was unintended. So to quickly trace the journey since 2019, it has been a quickly evolving journey that has also mirrored the shift in societal and market opinions. And in a sense, why does it matter for us, for securities regulators? You were right in mentioning what the chairman of IOSCO had said, but just to recap, is because it affects all three of our objectives. The objectives of IOSCO being investor protection, market integrity and efficiency, and financial stability. And it does affect all three of these objectives. That's why IOSCO was in this issue. And given the breadth of our membership with over 130 members that totally regulate 95% of the world's capital markets, we recognized that this issue was crucial and needed to be there somewhere near the top of our agenda. So what did we do? We had set up around that time an information sharing network, but then we went full on to a board level task force in February 2020 to do policy work on three areas. So what are these three areas? The first was about disclosure for issuers. We published a report in June 2021 on disclosure needs of investors in respect of sustainable finance. And in fact, we called for the setting up of the International Sustainability Standards Board. And I'd like to believe that our engagement with the IFRS Foundation, with whom, of course, we've had a long working relationship in terms of the accounting standards, and we'd like to believe that our engagement spurred the IFRS Foundation to set up the ISSB, and they did it pretty quickly by COP26 of that year in Glasgow. But in our report, as early, one has to say now, as early as June 2021, we also spelled out what would be the criteria we would use if we were to endorse the ISSB standards, because we had earlier endorsed the International Accounting Standards, the IFRS. And so we had spelled that out, but that was policy work. That was the first area of policy work. The second was on essentially greenwashing considerations relating to asset managers. And then we published in November 2021 our recommendations on disclosure, but also sustainability-related practices, policies, and procedures at the asset management level. And the third crucial work stream was on ESG ratings and ESG data providers, where we called for regulators to focus more attention on these. And we published a range of good practices to be considered by the industry. Again, that was done in November 2021. And so fast forward to 2022, we had 4 work strands. The first was clearly about the ISSB standards. So then we set about encouraging, of course, the ISSB to go forward with its standards, but then we were also then going to analyze these standards towards potential endorsement. And the ISSB, one has to say, moved very fast after being set up to already issue the exposure drafts in mid-2022, and we had a very, very fruitful engagement with the ISSB. But we did not stop there. We also developed a work stream on developing a vision for what an assurance framework should encompass. Even if we were all looking towards sustainability reporting, we were quite clear that we needed to develop an assurance framework hand in hand. And then we set up in 2022 a new work stream on promoting good practices. And I think that is something that the PRI and its members have been very much engaged on, which was on the basis of our 2021 recommendations for asset managers and ESG ratings and data products providers. And then we also set up a work stream on carbon markets, recognizing the role that carbon markets, both compliance markets and voluntary carbon markets, can play. And so coming quickly to where are we now in 2023, because it seems almost like yesterday that we were beginning this work, but I think it is fair to say that we have actually achieved quite a few important milestones. Probably of the most importance to many in the audience is that we have endorsed the ISSB standards in July, and we did assess these standards against the criteria that we laid down in our 2021 June report. Essentially, there were these 5 pillars. I don't need to get into a lot of detail, but firstly, that they should genuinely serve as an effective global framework for consistent and comparable approaches to reporting. Secondly, that they should be connected to the accounting and financial reporting standards. Third is that they should promote interoperability by acting as a common framework for national or jurisdiction-related requirements. Fourthly, that they should meet core investor and capital market needs. And fifthly, that they should form the basis for the development of a robust audit and assurance framework. And on that, we've on assurance, we laid out our expectations that ESG assurance standards should be ready by and 2024. They should be framework agnostic and profession agnostic. Our call for action for asset managers and ESG ratings, I think, has received a lot of support from the industry. We've had very fruitful engagement with the PRI and with the others in our roundtables. And then I should say, given that this conference is in Tokyo, that we got a tremendous response from Japan in terms of creating the codes of conduct for ESG ratings that were based on our 2021 ratings, 2021 report for ESG ratings. And lastly, we have set out on carbon markets expectations on how sound and well-functioning carbon markets should look like. And we laid out 14 recommendations in our final report published in June 2023. So, Margarita, that is essentially a roundup of what we have been busy with in sustainable finance from 2019. And with that, I turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Tajinder. And turning to the policymaker, your role is really to provide the beacon for the market. Where do we want to go? This role of government. So can you tell us, where is Australia going now?
Thank you. So Australia has been on a very busy journey over the last almost 18 months since we had a change of government. And we are one of the countries, I guess, where the change of government was driven in part through societal expectation of more ambitious climate action. So it's been at the front and centre of our government policy agenda since that change in party. I think it's important to understand for the Australian context that our country, I guess our income is heavily dependent on foreign investment. So we need to create an attractive investment environment. And that goes to obviously the ambition we put into our domestic policies. The government set up a centralised whole-of-government approach to reaching net zero climate change goals. They're embedded now in all of our economic policies. We've set up new agencies. And to touch on a point on the just transition earlier, we have the new net zero authority, which will be looking at how to transition some of the communities and the regions that have been heavily built on the back of fossil fuel industry, how we maintain those communities through transitioning them into new opportunities. And for Australia, we're lucky. Not only were we blessed with fossil fuel endowments, we also are blessed with a lot of renewable energy endowments. So lots of potential for renewable energy. In fact, our government set the ambition of being the world's global leader on renewable energy with a target to hit 82% of our grid sourced through renewable energy. I think that's important for an investment climate because it starts to signal the direction of government activity, where public funds are going to be spent. And in terms of supporting the frameworks to support investment, the government is now also busily working on putting in place a sustainable finance taxonomy, which will hopefully be introduced towards the end of the year. Part of that will be the introduction of green sovereign bonds and also looking at mandated climate reporting. But so far, the regulators have been busy keeping an eye on our businesses who are very active in this space too, and we've had a high level of voluntary climate disclosure reporting despite that sustainable finance taxonomy being a little bit delayed.
Great, thank you. And national regulators like Japan's FSA have been also very hard at work doing a lot of things connected to what Tajinder said. So you've been working on reporting requirements, greenwashing as well, ESG ratings, transition-related tools. So the FSA mission today has also changed, like IOSCO's. But this strong focus on sustainability, how does it relate to sustainability goals, sustainability outcomes, such as the net zero commitment in Japan?
Well, thank you very much. Just like the IOSCO or Australia, we are also having a very busy a couple of years in the past, and so truly a lot of things are going on the sustainable finance area. And so now my organization, the Japan FSA, together with other relevant ministries, leading the Japan sustainable finance policies. But just looking back, when I first committed to this agenda, it was in 2015 when I was seconded to the OECD Green Finance team, and the year the Paris Agreement was adopted, of course, and the SDGs were adopted by the United Nations. And well, just looking back, at that point, I must say that Japan was a relatively slow starter in this compared with some other advanced economies. But in the last several years, particularly the last 2-3 years, the change that happened in Japan is remarkable, I must say. And so just give you some examples. Well, on the disclosure front, now in terms of TCFD supporting entities, Japan is by far the world #1. And from this year, we have introduced a new statutory requirement for sustainability disclosures for listed companies in the annual financial reporting. And also to avoid greenwashing, this March, we introduced a new supervisory guidelines for the ESG investment trust. And just as mentioned by Tajinder, last December, we introduced the Code of Conduct for the providers of ESG ratings and data. So this is the first of this kind introduced by a financial regulator. And of course, it is largely based on the IOSCO recommendations. And on the climate front, we are strongly advocating the idea of transition finance. We established transition finance guidelines and roadmaps. And just as mentioned by the Prime Minister Kishida this afternoon, we are soon issuing the world's first the sovereign transition bond on a large scale. So by and large, I can say that Japan is catching up with other economies in many areas, and even in some areas, we can even say that we are leading the world on the policy front. And so why this change has happened very rapidly, particularly in the last couple of years, I think, well, the sustainability is fundamentally rooted in our nation and the culture and tradition, I think. But particularly, there are, I think, two things at play here. So one is on the policy front. Well, just 3 years ago, it was October in 2020, the Prime Minister at that time, Mr. Suga, made an announcement of the reaching net zero by 2050. And actually, after that announcement, it accelerated the drives made by not only the government, but financial institutions and also other corporates. But secondly, more fundamentally, I think now the people are thinking that this is not someone else's problem or their problem, but it is our problem, particularly the climate change. So I think you are lucky to be here from this week, because from this week, just finally, the summer heat has somehow receded. But until last week, the end of September, we had more than 30 degrees Celsius, and there are huge storms coming almost every month. It was not seen in some decades ago. So physically, people are feeling the change, and particularly the younger generation are very keen on those sustainable agenda. So this is driving forward our move towards sustainability and to tackle climate change.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really impressive to see how the government at the highest level leads the market towards those goals. And as you say, embedding this in the law, net zero goal, was really a strong signal to the Japanese market, and it's impressive to see all the progress made since then. And if I can turn this to the conversation to standard setters. So Komori-san, ISSB is the first big step towards global harmonization to address the alphabet soup that Tajinder was mentioning earlier. The situation is different now, but it has been quite the experience. And if you can tell us a little bit how you worked, for example, with Asian countries who are already developing their corporate disclosure frameworks, how this influenced your work, and how do you see ISSB going forward? And also, what is needed to ensure global adoption of ISSB?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of ISSB, we very much we very much appreciate the great support and encouragement from the IOSCO. But I'm afraid he told everything before me, so I just focus on the Asian market, Asia-Oceania market. So I'd like to highlight 3 points. One is fact that this is a broad area from the north to the south, including Australia and New Zealand. And also, each country has a great diversity in terms of history, culture, say, disclosure system or something like that, almost everything, one by one. So that is the one point I recently recognized once again, although I have lived in Tokyo for many years and traveled very much, but this is a fact I found. And the second point is that this is the area where many many disclosure standards and initiatives have been used voluntarily by companies for many years, 20, 30 years or more. So, such as a integrated reporting framework, GRI, SASB standards, and TCFD, or UN Global Compact, CDP, etc. So, this is another, say, diversity in this region. But I can say that, looking from the different angle, I think that this would be a great advantage to companies in this region because we embedded integrated reporting framework and say TCFD, SASB standards, CDSB concept, and we are now looking for interoperability with GRI and ESRS as well, and also we had MOU with CDP recently. So I hope this would be a great advantage when companies in this area decided to challenge the disclosure based on our S1 and S2 going forward. And the third thing is that I can see great momentum since the birth of ISSB 2021 or before and after the publication of S1 and S2 in June this year. So, for example, Japan with SSBJ is now leading the discussion how to make Japanese version S1 and S2 towards at latest March 2025. And Korea with KSSB took the same way. And also Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia had made a public consultation. And I can see other countries like Taiwan, Indonesia, Philippines, and Malaysia, India also following suit those countries in this region. And but at the same time, I would like to ask for regulators in this region to, when they adopt S1 and S2, we would like to make it as a set of S1 and S2 at the same time. Because S1 is, in my understanding, is a foundational standards covering every sustainable topics, which might be influential to the corporate future cash flow and cost of capital, access to the capital, and also business model on the short, mid, long term. And then we picked climate change, climate issue from S1 as S2. And then with S2 focuses on data or narrative, say, explanation by companies' management, such as, say, scenario analysis, climate resilience, or something like that. So maybe when we decide what's next beyond climate, such as a biodiversity or human capital, human rights issue, that should be, again, S1 and S3, S1 and S4, always, ever. So this is our concept when we say when we made say discussions about S1 and S2, and also we also ask the regulators to keep a global baseline concept, because again, we made a very much high level say baseline, which will meet the needs of the investors and the lenders in a capital market when they make say sustainability analysis in their portfolio companies. So those are the 3 points I'd like to point out. But overall, we very much expect a great harmonization, not in long future, far future, probably around the 2024, 5, 6 or something in this region. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you, Takada-san.
Yes.
Will the FSA respond to this call?
Yeah, of course. We are making it clear that we very strongly support the work of the ISSB, and of course we are going to adopt the ISSB and incorporate it into the Japanese disclosure framework. And so we established the SSBJ, or Sustainable Standard Board of Japan, last year, as a kind of the counterpart to the ISSB activities in Japan. And SSBJ has laid out its plan publicly, and it says that they are going to work on the Japanese version of S1 and S2. And so they will publish the draft version by March 2024, and also to finalize them by March 2025. So hopefully by then we will have the Japanese version of S1 and S2.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Takeda-san and Komori-san. I am glad to report, to make an announcement actually, that investors can support this adoption as well. And PRI, the London Stock Exchange, and the UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative will be issuing shortly a call to action to the relevant authorities across different jurisdictions to adopt ISSB on an economy-wide basis by 2025. So we will invite all of you, all our signatories, to sign this statement. And if I can turn to you, Tajinder, do you foresee any challenges in this process? Anything else we should be thinking of? Anything else investors should be considering?
Well, I think, firstly, of course, I want to very much thank both Komori-san and Takada-san because of the work that is happening in Japan and in the region. And I think the aspect about of these standards essentially serving as a global framework with interoperability, I think is crucial. It is crucial to investors who are there in that room, I think. And just to mention that we have kicked the tires, and then we carried out a comprehensive and independent review of these standards. And we came to the view that they do serve as an effective and proportionate global framework for investor-focused disclosure. Now, of course, the question is about how these standards are used. And there are a number of ways which we actually spell out in the way that we have published our endorsement itself, which is that, indeed, we would expect in some cases, some jurisdictions are directly adopting these standards. That is one thing that is happening. The other is that there are jurisdictions that are applying these standards and are being informed by these standards, as we heard the case about Japan in terms of the Japanese version of S1 and S2, and so on. I think we are hearing very, very supportive, very, very encouraging signals with regard to what is happening in jurisdictions. But I think it is also, and indeed, the publication of the European Commission's adoption of the ESRS, I think that followed within 5 days of the IOSCO endorsement of the ISSB, and the European Commission itself announced that it has integrated the ISSB standards into them. I think that was quite crucial because there was, and understandably, there was anxiety about, is this being very fragmented? Are we going to be able to achieve, a degree of consistency and a global framework? So from that perspective, I think we've seen some really, really welcome news. And around the globe, as we are engaging with jurisdictions, we are hearing from them about their initiatives, which are based on the ISSB framework. Now, the couple of, or maybe 3 things that I would say. One is that we are already developing hand in hand with the ISSB. So again, thanks to Komori-san and to the ISSB for this collaboration. And indeed, it is also in collaboration with other agencies. We are developing a capacity building program to help our members understand how to go about the implementation of this, because finally, whether they themselves set the standards, whether they are set by another body, a board, the job of supervision and enforcement is that of our members. So I think that's really important, that capacity building. And so we have already run 2 events in collaboration with the ISSB in September 2022 and May of this year, and we will definitely be having some more. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that a thing that I think we all need to really appreciate is the engagement that we had with the ISSB, and where the ISSB actually took on the task of developing an adoption guidance. And I think that adoption guidance is on track to be finalized, as we understand, by the end of this year. And that adoption guidance was responsive to many, let's say, concerns from the regulators as well. And that adoption guidance will set out pathways for gradual take-up of the ISSB standards, because not everyone is there to be able to implement these standards directly on day 1. So to understand what needs to be done to help those issuers and jurisdictions that find the full and immediate implementation of the ISSB standards challenging, and that will allow them to participate progressively. So I think that's a very wise course of action being pursued by the ISSB, and we are, of course, engaged in that. And that will also go hand in hand with capacity building. And the third point that I would like to again stress is that assurance is going to be really important in this area. And we are already focusing on assurance, and I suspect in 2024 that will be quite a lot of things that we do. But the bodies on the assurance side, the IAASB and the ESWA, so on the audit and assurance side, or the ethics standards side, they are fully committed, fully engaged to develop those standards in accordance with IOSCO's vision that these should be timely, because we want that these standards are already there for assurance against those issuers that are already going to use the ISSB standards in 2025. So the assurance framework should be finalized by 2024, and that these will be framework agnostic and profession agnostic. So, Margarita, with that, I think there is quite a lot of hope there in terms of how we see global convergence and alignment in this area, because we are already seeing a lot of that already happening now.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Quick question to you. ISSB, all in?
Yes, we've been engaging in that process, and that's absolutely the baseline in which our sustainable taxonomy and our work in this area is going to be based.
Great, thanks. So I want to turn back to the audience to move to the second part of our discussion, and I wanted to come back to you, Jessica, but if you can please indulge us with your voice once again. ISSB and corporate disclosures, in a way we are figuring this out, but we hear voices from signatories that regulatory fragmentation across other policy tools and areas is a problem. In our own research, we see this around investor disclosures, stewardship regulations, taxonomies, etc. So if we put corporate disclosures aside, do you see the regulatory fragmentation as a problem? If yes, please raise your hand. Those that don't raise their hand are happy to disclose to 20 taxonomies. Okay, so global alignment does matter. I think we're more ready to hold a glass than raise hands, but thank you so much. So, Jessica, back to you. So how do you view this need to provide investors with harmonized frameworks? Because you mentioned earlier and at the policy conference as well, Australia, alongside many other markets, need global investors to help on the economic transition. So how do you do this, align with other regulatory reforms around the world? And also, how do you make sure that global alignment is not equivalent to a lowest common denominator, but on the contrary, increases both policy effectiveness and the overall ambition of the reforms that you're conducting?
Thank you. So I think for us, we spend a lot of time engaging, a lot of time on long flights, travelling internationally. And that's important for us because we are seeking to attract in global talent, global capital, and therefore we've got to compete with a lot of other jurisdictions for that. It's important that we reduce the cost of investment for foreign investors into Australia by making sure where possible we can align our taxonomies, and we do that through looking at best practice, and often those that have already gone before have tried and tested some of these things, and it means that we can, I guess, shortcut some of the challenges as being a first mover on the sustainable taxonomy front. So we've looked at what ASEAN's doing. We engage in ministerial and policy dialogues to talk through how sustainable taxonomy is working in ASEAN countries. We look at what the UN's doing. We look at what a range of international organisations are doing. We engage through G20 processes. We're often engaged in G7 processes as an add-on country. That is a lot of complex global information, and then putting that into a domestic context is challenging. But for Australia, it is important that we align as much as possible with those global settings, and in terms of ambition, that it's fit for purpose for our jurisdiction. So, I think it's appropriate to see some of these taxonomies as providing a good baseline, but should not restrain countries from taking extra steps if it's right in their jurisdiction.
Thank you. And Tajinder, is IOSCO going to focus next on common principles on investor disclosures, for example?
Well, I think there are a few things that we are looking to focus in 2024. I think definitely the aspect about investors or asset managers, I think has been crucial. We are, in fact, going to publish a report before COP28 on supervisory practices to address greenwashing in asset management and ESG ratings, and that also talks about disclosures that are there. And I think that is something that continues to be important. But also, what we are going to do is to look at transition plans, because the annual sustainability reports are only one part of the information puzzle, and the other elements in this puzzle is the role of transition plans, because they provide forward-looking information from the real economy to allocate capital effectively. And we see that jurisdictions are already moving forward with the European Union. They have declared their intention. The UK Transition Plan Task Force, Singapore's announcement that the MAS will set supervisory expectations in this regard. And in the US, we've seen the publication by the US Treasury of voluntary principles that highlight emerging best practices for private sector financial institutions. And that's why, given the importance of this area, we will also be looking at transition plans in this area. And of course, the point that I was mentioning for 2024, is that we will be carrying out our capacity building further, and some of them in time will also go forward to look at how things are happening with regard to investors, with regard to asset managers, and even ESG ratings providers. So there is a full agenda that should also help what people in the room are most concerned about.
Great, that's great to hear. Thank you. Takada-san, common principles on investor disclosures, that's appealing to you?
Yeah, I think, yes, it is very important to secure the interoperability of the framework and the principles of standards. I said the principles are not exactly the standard itself, not necessarily. I mean, so in order to secure interoperability of the regulatory framework, of course, we are very strongly committed to the international discussions, of course, including the ISSB and IOSCO or FSB, NGFS, IPSF, so many acronyms. And so just I talked about this morning's policy conference as well. But I think the perfect conversion or alignment of the regulation worldwide is at this moment not feasible practically or even desirable because there are many differences across regions. Each region has its own culture and its own issues. So I think, but at least we should share the common principles across jurisdictions. And I think this is compatible with the ISSB approach because just as Komori-san said, the ISSB is providing a common ground framework or maybe the building block approach. And so in terms of the disclosure standards, the ISSB lays the foundation stone and on which each jurisdiction can top up and to make the disclosure framework specific to each jurisdiction. I think that approach is more practical and also flexible enough to allow for the regional diversities about this issue. So I think Japan is working towards this end, and we are preferring the principle-based approach in about our regulation because the principles are relatively easier to import or export, and so easier to share across jurisdictions.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is a strong expectation to follow suit on the great story that ISSB has been on so many other files. We are updating our policy toolkit of key financial policy reforms, and we have a list including stewardship, due diligence, and others that would benefit very much from multilateral support on common principles or global standards or so on. So I think we're at the beginning of a great overhaul here of financial regulations, which is really, really welcome. Komori-san, climate is key. The foundational S1 is key. But the economic transition, as discussed at the opening panel, has many aspects that investors need to understand. Jobs, governance aspects, the entire socioeconomic weight of the transition is something that will benefit from other corporate reporting requirements and standards. So what would that be? You mentioned earlier social, biodiversity. What's next for ISSB? Okay,
so you mean the next agenda after Beyond Climate?
What is S3, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, right. Okay, so before that, I'd like to say thank to our jurisdictional working members, including IOSCO. Members are from Europe, EU, EFRAG, and Japan, FSA, SSBJ, and China, Ministry of Finance, UK, FCA, FRC, and also US SEC. So that is a great opportunity for us to keep discussion and dialogue and engagement as well with those regulators, people around the world. And we recently included Singapore and Chile as well. So we are now expanding our networking effort to talk with more and more regulators, people. And also, of course, we thank IOSCO's endorsement of S1 and S2 in July. And also, we very much appreciate the great support from G7, G20, and FSB as well. So this is, again, great moment for us to thank everybody around us for making us disclose S1 and S2 in such a speedy pace, in a sense. We also, we made a public consultation which closed on the 1st of September last month about what's next beyond climate. So we picked up, we posted biodiversity and ecosystem as well, and also human capital issue and human rights issue, as well as integrated reporting system as well. So right now, I thank once again, we received more than 400 valuable, great comment letters from worldwide. So we are now working very hard, very hard to analyze what our stakeholder request us, what our stakeholders want us to do or something. So right now, I can say that what would be our next agenda beyond climate, but this is a topic which we are going to discuss from November, probably a board meeting in November, towards to the first half of 2024 on the public occasions. So I hope, everybody here, keep watching what we discuss about that. And also, if there is anything you want to add to your comment letters, please engage us. Please continue engage us. So that is one thing I wanted to explain right now. And also, in terms of public consultation, we closed the SASB internationalization application, and we had a discussion on a board meeting level 3 weeks ago in Montreal. And so we need to finalize this project, SASB internationalization project, by the end of this year. So that's another message from us. And also, I need to highlight the value of the sustainability digital taxonomy, which is a good tool between, preparers and investors, how to directly and how to easily, effectively deliver corporate disclosure to the investor side and the capital market. So those are the 3 issues. And I would like to say thank you once again. And also, finally, I'd like to talk about, capacity building, as you pointed out, that we will, provide our adoption guide for regulators, and also educational materials, such as materials to be posted on ISSB's Knowledge Hub by the end of this year. So there are lots of things we have at the moment by the end of this year. So, but we need to disclose, we need to publicize such materials one by one towards the end of this year, because 1st January 2024 is our effective date. So we need to be ready to provide everything to the stakeholders, particularly preparers and investors in the capital market.
Thank you, Komori-san. And one thing I note here, and that was iterated at the policy conference this morning, is that investors need to say when things are right. Because often we hear when things are wrong or where investors are not happy with this or that rule, but it's policymakers need to know when they do something right. So please engage to say so. And the last words are for the government. Jessica, we're out of time, but please, we're in for the long haul. How can investors support maintaining ambition, driving effective policy reforms? What do you need from investors to continue?
As a nice segue from what you just said, please tell us when we do a good job, because we need the morale boost. I guess these are all complex challenges, so the role of investors is critical to making sure that the policies that we're developing, the regulatory frameworks are implementable and achieve the societal goals that we're setting. So I think it's a bit trite to say, come and speak to us, but it's actually a very important aspect of policy development. In the former panel, there was a discussion around how we need to think about workforce for Australia. Huge, big challenges in terms of shifting workforce, reskilling, understanding what the supply and demand dynamics will be for us for things like renewable energy trade, to set up hydrogen supply chains. That requires a lot of market intelligence, but also an understanding of what your workforce needs are. And those are all very practical ways that you can engage, as well as engage in the range of broad economic reforms that are taking place that will underpin the targeted sustainable finance frameworks.
Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much. ありがとうございます。